Hey everyone, really quick before we get into the podcast today, just wanted to let you know that Playing with Power is going to be at MagicCon Vegas this weekend. We're going to be doing Learn to Play CDH, meet and greet events, and even going to be recording games at the Dragon Shield booth from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. on Saturday. We hope to see you all there. Come by and say hello, and let's get playing.
Welcome back to the Playing with Power podcast. I am your co-host, DefCat, and I'm here with Ryan.
I'm technically your host, but I'll be the co-host today. We'll see how the conversation goes.
I am so excited to bring to you guys something very near and dear to my heart, a subject matter that I wanted to bring up, which can be, for some, maybe something new, and hopefully not to those who do play this format. Why is CEDH so fun, and why do we love playing it?
Yeah, this was an interesting topic for me because Jay and I, we actually talked about this before we even started recording today. It was, it's always just so natural for us to say, yeah, CEDH is a blast. You should play CEDH. But from an outsider perspective, when you're so entrenched in it so long, it's sometimes you lose track of what the outsiders think looking in. And we kind of want to talk to those outsiders today, if you're giving us a chance, as well as relate to those who have been entrenched in it like us for so long, of what exactly is it about this format that we love so much, and maybe if it's something that you are looking at possibly getting into, some of the benefits of doing so.
Yeah, and I think it's not far-fetched to say that a lot of us took some breaks from CEDH, especially those of you that are coming back post bans, and now you're trying to rethink the wheel a little bit. Why did I play this format to begin with? Were those bans a part of what made me enjoy it? Did I like the fast-paced nature? Was Dockside the ultimate dopamine hit? I'll never ride that high again. Whatever angle you're shooting from and going back into the format, I wanted to talk about what exists here and why I have not received, in my opinion, any of the burnout feelings or frustrations with the format I've seen shared online. And I didn't want to recant or look at other people's exhaustion or frustration and go, well, I'm having fun, because that feels a little bit dismissive. But I wanted to just tell you in my own space, why I like it and if you relate to that at all.
And I'm going to play a little bit of devil's advocate here. I'm going to be vouching for those who might have experienced some burnout and might have said, hey, this is something that I really liked, and maybe the bands or something else maybe drew me away from it. And we're going to be talking today about each side of this and why this format is still such a great game to play, even after all it's been through, all these different years, all of its evolutions. It's still something that we just love so much.
Absolutely. And so our first point out of 3 will be about deck building and theory crafting, which I have to say, and I think this is a definitive statement, I don't think it could be disputed, we're at the highest point that deck building and theory crafting have ever been. The Final Fantasy set brought us an insane amount of new commanders that are all extremely viable within this format as a commander and within the 99. And I have been riding a huge deck building high, more than I ever have since I started playing. And all of the decks more and more feel like something that can exist. And I feel a little bit of that. It's the fact that we are in a mid-range meta, and it feels hard to really define what is the best strategy at the moment because of how many, good stuff piles there are floating around at the top end of, every top 16 list you see. But the theory crafting excitement has not dimmed. It's only gotten brighter for me.
I agree with that. And one of the things I think is really important for those that I'm going to be advocating for throughout this is that there was definitely a time in CEDH where it did feel stale. Basically, it was pushing out, a lot of really powerful strategies were pushing out everything, and all the theory crafting was kind of falling to the wayside because it was starting to resemble a flash problem. And when I say flash problem, I mean the card flash when it was banned back in 2020. A lot of things back then in CEDH were, well, can this beat flash? Well, no, it can't. So we're not even going to bother. And I think that CEDH got to that point eventually, up until the banning, the most recent banning. I don't always want to harp on it, but it's a really good pillar for different periods in time, where it was starting to get to that effect of, well, can it beat, Tim Necrom? Can it beat dockside strategies? Well, if it can't, well, does it have red? Well, if it can't, then we might as well not even bother. And in the time since then, we've definitely seen a resurgence in deck building and theory crafting, and not to mention just the audience and the exposure that CEDH has had over these past half decade or more. That's really allowed this community to really lean into those things in a way that's really fun. which is what we're talking about.
Very. Yeah, I think fun's the best way to put it too, because it's always the most exhilarating experience to win with a deck that shoots at a unique angle. And so many of the new commanders do that. And well, just in general, so many of the new cards. The fact that Valley Floodcaller has its own infinite and isn't just a flash enabler. The fact that so many of the new commanders go off with some random 10-cent common from Onslaught. And you keep looking at all these new combos and you go, well, does that really win? It's like, well, yeah, that's a new win con. And for that commander, it's even better sometimes than shooting at some of the regular angles because of how difficult it is to interact with, or how easy it is to find in those colors, to the point where now the conversation doesn't have to be, does it beat Flash, or does it beat Thoracle and Breach or Dockside strategies? Because the speed factor has also lessened. We've softened that needing to be by turn 3 or 4 in the idea that people are a little happier playing a slower game. So it does open these up. We've got some breathing room in these strategies. But all this to say, and almost kind of feeding into the devil's advocate here, we're also not in a very good parasitic place to be. We don't want to be sitting here constantly gleaning off of other decks, because you do need to defend yourself a little more than you ever have.
Yeah, definitely so. And I really want to drive that point home. This has been the best environment for deck building that we have seen in years. The fact that we are actually looking at something like Final Fantasy and saying, wow, there's like 5+ viables in CDH alone across the different tiers, and even more as you go down further the tiers, that is unheard of. That is unprecedented.
Yeah.
That comes around once every 2 to 3 years, maybe, where you get more than one per set. The idea that these many things have been ejected just shows you what an open space this is right now. And so those of you who have maybe stepped away from CDH because you're like, man, I just love brewing decks. It was one of the things I loved about Commander. And then when I moved up to CDH, eventually it all got pushed out and I fell away from it. I encourage you to take another look at it, because right now it is in a really good spot when it comes to this stuff.
Yeah. And it's the most fun deck building can be, is when there's new things to play with. And the good thing that there's, new things in the 99, you can even revisit your favorite ones. People have been looking at decks like Tasigur again. People have been looking at a lot of old one-trick pony commanders, realizing that there's new strategies for them to breathe in. But kind of boiling this down for a second, let's get into what you and I really love and what we've been excited about. I'll kind of share mine and let you jump off and tell me if you relate to this in any way or have a specific, scenario. But for me, what happened with Final Fantasy was realizing that we are not getting a new Tivit. We weren't getting oh, hey, this is CDH because it itself has its own new combo, where we had Time Sieve and went, okay, maybe this strategy is valuable off of the back that it has an extra win con or additional value engine. No, it's that the new commanders that we are seeing have unique angles. I feel excited about playing Terra because of the unique mill strategy it has, the unique advantage engine it has, where Terra Magical Depth says when she enters the battlefield, you mill 5 cards and you may return an enchantment milled this way. That turns on top deck tutors to be ways to get things instantly to hand if you are already going to cast your commander. Squee the Immortal can be cast from your graveyard, which makes playing the, of course, food chain combo even easier, because now you can both mill it, play it, get food chain back in your hand. So many cool ways that are now represented, but at the same time, we did in fact get commanders that do actively have their own win conditions that are now separate and do all these things. So it's not that stale, hey, this commander wins with this card that we found from 1995 and that's kind of cool, but Breach is still faster. It's like, no, they play the normal strategies. That deck plays Thoracle, that deck plays Breach, but guess what? It's got one of the fastest, easiest to pull off food chain lines you've ever seen.
And it gives you it gives you a little bit of both. It gives you the idea of being able to do something in a new creative space, like you said, lean into a mill strategy without saying, well, I have this really convoluted combo that's really hard to pull off, and at the end of the day, Breach is just going to be better or something to that effect. We already have proven strategies and we know they work. We're talking about getting into a zone that allows you to really leverage those strategies that have already been proven in new and exciting ways. If you are a person who loves mill in the example we provided, but don't really care about something like Thoracle or like food chain, this gives you an angle to be able to lean in and do something that you really found really enjoyable and fun. Maybe you liked Underworld Breach because you liked mill, but other things that were getting into that just weren't as effective as just some other strategies. But like you said, now we have something like food chain that you can use and leveraging a mill strategy, giving us the opportunity to get new angles and get new ways to be able to execute these in either more efficient or in different ways that are harder to work around or interact with, which is super great too.
Yes, having that silver bullet for a meta is something that CDH has always done. I mean, that's how Stacks was born. We looked at the meta and went, you know what? Trinisphere on turn 1 against Rogsai kind of sounds fun. I don't mind that. Trinisphere before a Krark hits the battlefield feels good. Feels a little comfy. And now, although the Trinisphere strategies due to Mana Crypt being banned have died down, and obviously Stacks as an archetype is on its last legs in most case scenarios, we're not really seeing it at all. But the Wandering Minstrel and Root Maze is kind of the new 3-ball, having a 2 CMC commander that allows all of your lands to come in untapped, but everyone else's is so sexy. I love dropping that and watching it works that way in everyone's faces. Like, that is how the stack in fact works. I get to layer those any way I want to.
It's disgusting is what it is, but it's wonderful if you're the one who controls it, of course.
Yeah.
And I think silver bullets is a really good way to put it, because if we talk quickly about brackets, a lot of people have a lot of confusion when it comes to brackets 4 and 5. No cards are restricted, and that's kind of where they stop reading. They're like, well, what's the difference? Yeah. Well, we're talking about the difference between high power bracket 4 and CDH is CDH has a meta. And therefore, you can attack and build towards a certain meta within that with the intention and the goal to win. Whereas high power is, we still want to have fun and things like that. And let's not confuse the word fun with anything else. We still want to do it in a way that we can do it that doesn't necessarily care about a meta or care about your opponent's decks or care about a certain thing. You just want to do it with the most high powered cards possible.
Yes.
CEDH allows you to attack a meta and cater your card choices to be able to attack that meta and win in the most efficient way possible. And when you have new cards like this, it enables you to be able to move around certain things that have been meta calls to be able to get an advantage or a different way to approach something that other people might not be prepared for. The idea of milling something, for example, Rest in Peace hasn't been a silver bullet in years. Well, now suddenly Rest in Peace might be good again. And so having these different areas now that we can attack from and approach our deck building allows a lot more variety to come in and allows the meta to move like waves and to ebb and to flow as to see what strategies emerge and which ones die down and which ones come back. And that is such an exciting time to be in any given game, whether it be CDH, whether it be Magic. The idea when you see something shifting around and being able to be part of that wave is such an enjoyable feeling. And CDH is going through that right now, and it's amazing.
Yeah, it's an amazing time to be a new player as well. In the sense that there are so many channels that are so well established that have now kind of reconvened post this shakeup that we got from the bans, as well as tournaments blooming. The amount of tournaments this year is huge. We have such an insane amount of data to look at. And on top of that, kind of placating off the idea that bracket 4 is fun without concern.
Mm-hmm.
Bracket 4 is being able to push something as far as you want to without the concern that someone may be running anti-tech against your deck. You're slinging things with no regard to defense. Whereas in CDH, we are worried about our ability to defend our strategies or stop other strategies. We're thinking of that. And I think that's the biggest line we can draw, and it's what makes CDH theory crafting and deck building that much more exciting for me than bracket 4 on a personal level, is because I love going, oh my gosh, wait a minute, I can run Root Maze with Wandering Minstrel and stop these strategies. I can be running this level of graveyard hate that doesn't interact with my graveyard. Lots of different choices that when they pay off and I actually go to a tournament and it works, that is a new high. You're going to talk about it for the next week or two with your friends. You're going to be at Steak and Shake because it's the only place open after the tournament late at night, jabbering about, I told you that card, I included it, it worked. You didn't think so. And it's so much fun to have that conversation with someone post tournament.
Steak and Shake. What a terrible place to eat. I mean, let's eat at the Waffle House. You know, if we're gonna be eating griddle food, let's eat at the Waffle House and get a waffle at least.
Absolutely.
You know.
Yeah,
I 100% agree. Yeah, and I would compound onto that the idea that when you're in CDH that you can make educated guesses and assertions based upon the fact of your knowledge of a meta is also a really good and fun way to approach gameplay, which is what our next topic is.
So gameplay has always been presented to me, and when I first started speaking to Freedom Waffle, for example, and we were in the early days of the Breakfast Club, and we were on there all trying to jam and go to tournaments, and we were like, the tournament grinder was born. You know, we started really seeing each other every single time, and top 16 started to see some familiar faces. We recognized the better people got, and the more we interacted with one another, and the more we saw each other's deck lists, the board states got a little complicated, and we started to get a little worried on this 40 chess level, because someone would put for example, survival of the fittest down, and then it spurred a 5-minute conversation about what 10 other cards it could get, because we know their deck list and we know how that interacts, which means they're the threat. And you get into this whole grid and web of information of one another. But that's really exciting when done formally and done respectfully.
Yeah. And it's such a great feeling to be like, to whenever something hits the stack and you can ask the rest of the table to be like, you know what that gets, right? Or you know what this does, right? And everyone, and there might be somebody who does not know. And you say, well, this is a game ender, you know, this survival of the fittest is going to fetch this up, or, you know, they are specifically searching for this one land, probably Gaia's Cradle in today's meta. But, you know, these types of things, this type of knowledge, and when you're applying it into the actual gameplay is a really fun feeling. And this is where the devil's advocate comes in, because with this theory, this new deck building and how it's finally translating into gameplay, you have never been less sure than ever about when those moments arrive. Now, for some, I will admit that's a little uneasy for some, but you've always had that at tournaments to begin with. Everyone always brings the fringe brew, and you don't know how it works until you see it work, and that's sometimes how you just learn. But it's, you know, it's getting a little bit more scattered. It's, you know, there is an established meta. Yeah. We all know what Timna Crom does. We all know what Thrasios and Timna do. But when you see like these new Final Fantasy commanders, you don't always know what your interaction points are going to be. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it is something that, you know, does unsettle a few people, especially when they're established in CDH.
Yeah, you really start to get a taste, the difference between people, because my favorite portion of, you know, 2023 CDH was knowing other decks so well and going through stacks. And now when I look at a table, I have to constantly tell people about new brews, because Brewer's Advantage won't catch me. I'm constantly brewing. I'm constantly on those forums. I am always looking for the next deck. And so I get caught off way less than my friends who are tournament grinders, who are just focused on the meta. And it can be jarring in a game where other people won't recognize a piece as important when I see it. I remember the other day we were playing some practice games around the Final Fantasy commanders, and Noctis came out, and I started counting mana. And they were like, what are you looking at? It's not Godo. I'm like, well, if they have intuition, they have a flash speed win at any moment with 9 mana. And they're like, oh, okay, that's new. It's a bit jarring.
Yeah, absolutely. But also, once again, at the same time, it's about understanding and learning those lines. Like you said, you know, if you're a meta grinder, sometimes you will get called out. You usually only have to learn those lessons about one time, you know, when you see Noctis and then you get steamrolled by them at instant speed with your win on the stack. Yeah, you're not going to make that mistake a second time.
Nope.
Just like whenever you see in the established metas, like you said, of 2023, somebody had 1 green up, they could probably channel a Boseiju at any time. So you had to be aware of that. Or even if they had one blue up, is an incoming Swan Song coming? And
Yeah.
so, being able to pay attention to some of those things is what allowed our skill levels to grow and allowed us to better understand the deepness and complexities of this side of the format. But that's not to say that people always are just tournament grinders. Some people like the fringe brews and they still want to play their fringe brew against the Timnacroms and whatnot of the world. And
absolutely,
being able to do that is still 100% viable. It's still 100%, able to be done in this format.
Yeah.
And I think there are some voices online that are kind of saying, well, no, that's not really the case. Only if it's been approved by tournament results is it actually viable, and I've always disagreed with that, and I still do to this day.
Absolutely. Someone has to make those results happen, and I am a huge advocate for tryout decks. Let's not just go, this famous person reviewed it, they said it wouldn't be good, I'm going to drop it. I think we've had a lot of decks reemerge due to that syndrome where for a while when Marnius Calgar came out, there was a lot of people riding high on it. And then a lot of the larger names said, I don't know, grindy, kind of mid-rangey, can get shot from under. And then when the meta shifted and people still weren't looking at it, out of nowhere, you have these huge names that now are dedicated to Marnius that have been for a while that are just crushing it. And they've been brewing hard on that deck. And if it wasn't for those people, we wouldn't know that Marnius is a top deck as it is.
Mm-hmm. And the thing is the question that you want to ask yourself was it always a top deck? And were the voices just kind of drowning it out? Well, it's as good as Tivit. Well, if it's not, then I might as well not even bother. And that was a very common phrase back in 2023. And the idea that you could have something like this and have this open up and explored, things like Timna Thrasios and Tassiger and the like starting, really starting to come up again, like I said, post-ban. And then as the meta evolves and stuff like that, you really start to ask the question, were those decks actually pushed out? Were they not as good? Or do we just kind of moved on to new things because we just like to do that as Magic players? We like to try the new shiny toy that came out.
Yeah. I think there's things like Mardu Summer that try to prove these things that maybe don't go the full length, kind of playing the devil's advocate like we were talking about, where we want something to work and we really push it. And it really comes down to a pilot difference at that point. And talking about the great puzzle, talking about what's fun about a complicated board state, brewer's advantage, trying to talk about, finding those outs within a game. What's been unprecedented in today's meta has been Flash. It's been winning on the stack. And that is a feeling like no other. Being able to win on top of a win, on top of a win, on top of a board wipe, chef's kiss. It is the defining fun factor for me within tournament CEDH is that big final blowout where I'm able to either hold my bullet last, be able to really have that, I guess it's time, mind break trap, and everyone goes, no, like this huge sandbag moments. Those are just so exciting to the point that even being blown out in a tournament and having someone else pull something off like that, you're just impressed. I'm not salty. If someone can actually go that full length to keep Sly, have that, land in the back, no one noticed that they had the emergence zone, and then goes for some crazy line, I love it. And that's what makes the great puzzle of CEDH only something CEDH can have, because you aren't going to have this in any other format. There is no format in Magic that has such a complicated puzzle for you to solve that you could shoot this 27-point angle to fix it and solve it and win the game. And you're not going to find that in a lower powered version of Commander where there isn't enough that you can do. There aren't the resources. There just aren't the free spells. There isn't the flash enabling there. But in CEDH, you can get the most pleasantly complex but understandable form of Magic.
Yeah, I agree. There is nothing quite like it at the end of the day. It's why I bought into it when I first played it. It's why I play it to this day. There really is nothing to compare. And to compound on what you just said, even in bracket 4, you're not going to find that. Is because we all know what the other's playing, and the idea that you can do those things in anticipation of others allows such an extra element of complexity in a good way be unlocked through this type of gameplay that you're just not going to find in the lower brackets. And it's one of the reasons why I love it so much. And I think that that's great. But the thing
Absolutely.
is, not everyone does. Not everyone finds Flash or Flash enablers, not the card Flash, to be a great thing. If we look back even just 6 months ago, it's June as of this recording for those who are watching, we talked a lot about how toxic this meta has become because of things like Ristic Study and all these other, grind engines and advantage engines, and everything is terrible. And really, now that we're kind of moving out of that a little bit more, don't get me wrong, the complaints always happen because people will always complain. That'll happen. But we've seen that it's subsided a little bit more. And that's, I think, partly because of the dichotomy of what the gap from the bans left. We had such a fast format with so many fast enablers. And then all we were left with was this giant chasm. The same thing happened when the card Flash was banned in 2020. This huge chasm came out of nowhere. And all of a sudden, things like Ad Nauseam came to fill it. And that's what we experienced here. And we're starting to see people complain a little bit less. They're like, well, maybe it's not as bad as I made it out to be. I think really what I was doing, it was just still a little bit of an aftershock from not being able to play the cards I love so much. And so now here we are in a really great environment that allows you to say, like you said, come at it from angles that we really didn't see before. Yeah, Flash enabled type stuff was there, but we never saw it with the prevalence that we've seen it now in. And that's in a good way. But that's not to say that's what you have to play. You can absolutely play your own thing. You can play whatever you want. It's not Flash or nothing, but that's something you do have to consider when you're in this meta.
It is. And it does make decks that aren't running blue right now in a feels bad spot. We're definitely in a place where trying to win on your turn is not something that many good pilots honestly recommend unless it has immense jamming power. I think obviously so many people can speak to the power of a Tally's jam level and the ability to keep going for it. And for some, like my friend Jerry, that's all they want to play. They aren't touching any kind of mid-rangey blue. No. Every turn is a win attempt. That's all we got. I think the only deck I see him on is a Nala, and that is definitely a jam at every turn deck. And so the excitement that comes with the Flash enabling for me, and why I think that this is some of the most fun I've had in Magic, and specifically CDH, is I'm not worried as much about getting to my turn, being worried about, am I going to get locked out on someone else? Do I have to just sit here and watch someone jam a win on the turn? There's nothing I can do about it. I actually feel way more empowered than I ever have during a game. I feel like I'm taking the most game actions. I have the most control whether or not I win or lose than I ever have. I'm not staring at a Winota that's already locked me out. I'm not staring at a Rogsai that's going to go off before me. I'm honestly just enjoying setting up for the first 2 turns and then getting into a complicated board state that I have to solve and going, you know what? I believe I'm the better pilot at this table, and that's what's going to get me out of here. Not my deck choice, not something interesting. It feels like I get to navigate it and prove myself.
And that's always been a common complaint with those that are looking on the outside, looking in at CDH, is the feels bad from the bad beats of, well, you never even got a turn 2. That doesn't look like a fun format. I'm not going to play that. There's never been more autonomy that has been gained from these Flash enablers than it is right now. The idea that you just sat there and did nothing has never been less of a complaint than it is right now. It has been the lowest it has ever been because these Flash enablers give you so much more autonomy and control over the game. We talk about seat position all the time, and we talk about, turn 2 and turn 3 wins. And a lot of that stuff has really eroded away, and in a good way. Now we
Yes.
see ourselves in positions. Yes, maybe resources are still a common complaint, and we haven't fixed the seeding position. I'm not saying that Flash has, but you have never
Yeah.
been more in control of your outcome than you ever have than right now through the use of these types of tools, which is great. It's a great way to play right now.
Yes. And I think that we're more in control of it from the deck building standpoint and our deck choices standpoint. I think seeding order is one of the worst issues. It's the worst it's ever been statistically, but I think also a portion of that needs to be recognized. Jerry and I did a huge data analysis of 10,000 games and went over every bit and piece about how that gap has formed. And a portion of it genuinely is the fact that we're just better at the game and we're taking advantage of our seat order more too, not just that we've lost cards. And so that gap was growing indefinitely, as it were, until something changed, but it also just got motivated to push even farther when we lost all the mana and extra capability of getting out of a hole in seat 4. But the autonomy level, like we were saying, is in that deck building mentality and within the stack. It's less obviously in the seat order, and definitely something I'm hoping is addressed. But the main point I'm making about this is the fact that this is unique to CDH. There is no other game in the world that you can find this level of 4-player complexity and a personalized deck with unique decisions and instant speed stack. Like, the stack is one of the coolest things Magic will ever provide us, and CDH uses it the most. There's no other format that ever will. And like I said, no other game touches this. Come on.
Very true. So let's play some devil's advocate again. I thought you said that deck building has never been as wide and as varied, and theory crafting has never been as good as it is right now. But then you just said, well, wait a minute. I thought you said that, theory crafting and how you build your deck is going to be relevant and how you succeed in CDH. Those two
Yes.
seem like they might be at odds with each other, So what would you say to that?
The idea that creativity used to be seen as a negative. We used to look at a deck and go, well, that's not blue farm, or that isn't a breach heavy deck. And now we've replaced this comment with, well, can that survive someone grinding longer than you can with Ristic and going farther than your deck can? And the antithesis, the ability to silver bullet that strategy, is to have something that no matter the advantage someone has garnered, you can attack at an angle so prudent, so difficult to interact with, and or unique, or brewer's advantage to the point where they don't see it, that you can still pull out on a win. And it's not that in the current moment we have the strongest silver bullets we've ever had. That would be a definite lie. Breach and Thassa's are still our best strategies. Absolutely. Just like they were before. But do we have the most silver bullets we've ever had? Yes. There are the most new commanders, the most new cards in the 99, the most unknown factors that has ever been there, that I believe there could be active players that in between every tournament brew something different for a permanent brewer's advantage at this point. There's just so many things to do that you don't need to be locked into a deck that people eventually learn you from. And I think that's something that, people like Comedian do perfectly, constantly shuffling decks, constantly putting in new tech. And that is a huge reason you can win tournaments. And so absolutely, we aren't strong against what is still strong, but we have the most capability. And it will take a very advanced pilot in order to do it. And I challenge you viewers to become one.
I agree. And not only will it make you a better pilot, but it'll make you well-rounded in exactly how you approach a game. But what about those who loved a deck and their deck is no longer viable? The Roccos who leaned heavy into Dockside, or, the certain commanders who absolutely, or the Dehadas of the world, for example. What do you say to
Absolutely.
those people who said, well, I really liked it this way, and now the meta just doesn't seem like it is that way? What would you argue, or what would you say to that argument?
Far off in the distance, a twinkling star upon the shores of wherever Vikings last lived before they were killed off, there is a pyre that is currently ablaze. I am on it with my deck Yisan. I concur with you the fact that attempting to brew this will be something of a Sisyphus type situation. There is a lot you are pushing against, but I will say the boulder's smaller, where originally decks were eventually overshadowed all the time. There were decks that were always a flavor that were overcome by the sheer amount of value the good piles were able to bring to the table. But you do continually get new options to try, and we are waiting on those options to present themselves. But the fact of the matter is, it is a sinking ship for many. There are decks that will not see the light of day unless something unprecedented happens or a meta shift. But I do believe the margin is thinner for them. There is more wiggle room, but you are still in the same place any deck that slid out of meta was.
And I will also kind of make a ultimate statement here. If you only got into a format, I'm not even talking about CDH right now. If you only got into a format for one deck and then something nerfed that one deck and you left that entire format because of it, CDH isn't going to give you something that you were missing in the other formats. There's nothing that CDH is going to be able to do to be able to fill a void that the other formats were suddenly leaving behind, because you weren't married to a format, you were married to a deck. And trying out these different decks releases you from having that. I heard it a lot when Mox Opal was banned and other, key components were kind of nerfing Affinity left and right. And some people were just diehard Affinity players. There was nothing else that they would play but Affinity. And when that stuff happened, they just straight up left Modern, not adapted to a new Affinity or tried a different deck. Modern was just no longer for me. I break up with you, Modern, and I'm leaving a note. Yep. And it's just like there is no way that CDH is going to suddenly fix that problem, because number one, it's not a problem. So I hesitate to even call it a problem. It's just something that you identify with how you have fun. And that's okay. I will always say that CDH is never going to be for everybody. Just like Pauper or Modern or Standard is never going to be for everybody. And that's all right. If you try CDH and it's just not your thing, or you were really big into CDH because you were really devoted to one deck and that deck got nerfed or nuked in some instances, and you say, I just don't have any fun anymore, that's okay too. But I also do encourage you to do what you said, Jay. Absolve yourself from being identified as one deck and try things in that Brewer's Advantage type of way. And you will find that there is so much more fun to be had in this game in this format that you never realized because you were very, very centered on one deck. I'll take a personal example. For the longest time, I played Turbo. It's how I love to play. I played it in all other formats. When I came to CDH, of course, I drug that wagon behind me into it. I absolutely did that. And I did that for a lot longer than I should have, in my opinion. In retrospect, I look back and I said I probably should have branched out to more variety a lot sooner. And I can't tell you how much of a better player I am because I tried those other decks, the control variants and the mid-range variants and stuff like that. Not only did it make me a better CEDH player, it made me a better Magic player, and it made me a better Turbo player because I had a much better visibility into what the other decks were doing from a perspective I couldn't see as just being their opponent.
Oh my gosh, the amount of people that were in my situation, I will drown myself in this, no problem, where you feel like there's nothing that's going to ever save you. The water line just rose 2 inches. I'm going, no, Yisan, it's drowning. And someone went, dude, just stand up.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I realized I had been playing the format on my knees for years, just trying everything I can to make this one deck work. And someone handed me their blue farm list and I went, oh, it tastes kind of good. That was kind of fun. And I got my first turn 1 breach win and I went, oh, you said there's a faster deck? Is it Roxai? Was that it?
Yep.
And slowly I adapted to losing what I thought was my OTP deck. I had only ever played that, and I moved on. And partial to that, it was the fact that Yisan is just an old deck, and that was how I was introduced to the format. And then Savala came out, and I started playing that. And then Commander Legends happened, and I went, wow, there's a lot of other decks out there. Holy cow. And that was my branching off point, was when I saw Krark and I got that mental illness. And what makes CDH, just like we said, that fun puzzle, that fun excitement with this doesn't decay with a deck leaving. And I think, to defend Modern, for example, when everyone felt like we were in the most oppressive time in Modern with the companions, I loved the companion decks. I was a die-hard Luris player. I have 12 artist proofs of that card on my desk right now. Hence Def Cat, haha.
That's a lot of Luris, man. It's a lot of Luris. Wow.
I will happily post that on my Twitter.
Yeah.
The fun part of Modern for me was always playing something, for lack of a better term, degenerate. I loved playing the decks that people were like, why is that allowed to exist? I'm like, I don't know, it'll get banned eventually, but until then, it was great. And then I played Scam, and then that got banned. And then I ran into playing, before it was banned, the Uros and everything I could find that just felt nasty. That's what Modern's always been about for me. It's finding something that shouldn't exist and exploiting it. Luckily, my friends have saved me and put me onto Legacy, so I'm no longer terrorizing FNM and playing those style of decks and losing money to bans. But all that aside, in that same vein, when you're playing CDH, there's fun to be had in every archetype, and you just need to explore it.
Yeah, I agree. Have fun. Have fun in the format, and that's really the thing. Find out and explore what is preventing you from having fun in this format, and seek to remedy it if possible. Find out what the hang up is. Is it because your favorite cards are gone? You can get new favorite cards. Or maybe not. And maybe you need to find a new way to love it. Is your favorite deck gone? Well, there's other decks that can either play similar or play all together different, and you didn't know how much you might have enjoyed it. There's that too. Or there's just no shame in walking away for a while and see how things shake out. I don't begrudge a soul who walked away in, at the turn of the year, December, January, February. I don't begrudge anybody, because we hadn't figured it out yet. We were still reeling, like I said, from the chasm, and understanding that it needed to shake itself out. And you said, I just don't know if I want to be part of that. I'll come back maybe when it's shaken out. It's fine. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with taking a break. And I tell you now, if that was you, I encourage you to come back now, because it is in a really exciting spot.
As someone sitting on 25 fully painted dockside artist proofs that were delivered 3 hours after the ban, I was definitely concussed and absolutely didn't even utter the word CDH for a month. And then came back because I'd already bought a tournament ticket and I wasn't going to waste it, and went, it's still kind of fun.
It's so funny. You have a real thing for artist proofs, I'm finding out.
I got lucky that I'm friends with them. I just love working with artists. I also help run Kickstarters for them, which is such a exciting time. I mean, so many people actually know about artists now. That's also something really cool. And CDH players very specifically are very obsessed with artist proofs. So that's a cool community we have.
Yeah. So what else would you say might be a barrier for somebody who might say, this format's not fun anymore? I don't know if I want to come back in. What are some other arguments you've been hearing online, whether or not they be missed? What are some other things you've heard?
Absolutely. Honestly, one instantly comes to mind, and I think it's the one that you see flooding Reddit most of the time. It's on the top of r/competitive EDH, but it's bled into EDH, which has been, I am starting to lose the identity of what's bracket for, what's CDH. I'm confused about what I'm supposed to be defining this as. And although that might not seem like a barrier question, I think having doubts, having like a misunderstanding can be one of the biggest barriers you can have going into a format. As if I went into Modern and went, what do you mean I can't play the dual deck I bought from Walmart? I'm confused. Where's this line? What's a real Modern deck and what's not? That same thing happens here now, where someone went, okay, I used to play this deck. I'm coming back. Is this still considered CDH? Am I bracket 4 now? What do you mean Grenzo Doomsday hasn't been in a tournament in 6 months? I still have all the cards. What do you mean Boomer Jund isn't still in Modern? And so the question really is, are we doing a good job at defining that? And is it definable? And that's something that is absolutely still a conversation. And I will never be a snake oil salesman and tell you I know the answer to that. If anyone does, I'd have a lot of placating on that. I'd wait to see if that's really true and proven.
Yeah. I've always hated that term. That's not CDH. I've always hated that.
Yeah. Me too.
And it's been something that's pervaded through outside communities as well as sometimes in the communities, and sometimes even more toxically so in communities.
Yes.
For people shaming people for wanting to play something different. CDH has and always will be, in my mind and in my opinion, a mindset. It is not a list of cards or a database of decks. That is not what it is. It is not what somebody decides to ordain that this is now okay, a CDH deck or a CDH combo or a CDH card. CDH is a mindset. It is how you approach the game, which is why they say that there is a meta when they try to distinguish brackets 4 and 5. How you approach the game is how you define CEDH. If you want to play with a pre-con and you want to play it at a CEDH table, you have to discuss it with the table, and as long as they agree and you bring that CDH mindset to the table, that is a CDH deck. And I hear you in the comments typing away. I can't believe you'd say that. Pre-cons don't do it. For the most part, no. But I'm trying to prove a point. Basically, what I'm saying is it's not the deck that defines whether or not it's CDH. It is how you pilot the deck and how you approach the game that defines whether or not a given thing is CEDH. Once you absolve yourself from the idea that some benevolent beings that get self-appointed that say something is or is not CDH, you will find yourself finding so many more areas to have fun by trying pet cards, fringe brews, other things like that. Yeah. Doing those things can enable so many more funs when you release yourself from these shackles of labels, for lack of a better word.
Yeah. And we're talking in extremes here to prove a point. It's not that we're trying to say to bring a pre-con, or we're not trying to say that your deck choices aren't mattering. But the point is you're allowed to disagree with this. That's what's healthy about a discussion for a format. And you're allowed to have your spaces of, I think CDH must carry Force of Will in every blue deck. If that's like your defining factor, whatever your defining factor has to be, it's just making sure that we're not giving anyone that power to go, no, that's not CDH. That's the point of talking in extremes like this, because then you get people that I know for a fact have gone after Zeb's choice of Lotho as a CDH commander, even though they've never played against it. They've maybe watched a few games with it, but at the end of the day, if someone's dedicated enough to a deck and can prove the fact that they are doing their best at looking at it and then targeting it toward meta, they're targeting it toward making sure it can either interact and keep itself safe. If you can prove you are doing your damnedest to do those things, then it's CDH. You are of that mindset. You are doing everything you can to push it to that point. Obviously, if someone comes to a table and they have the mindset that a pre-con is their best at it, then that's just someone who doesn't understand or is new, and they have things to fill in gaps, and that's okay. And that's the point. It's the mindset that matters first. You have to have that before anything else follows. You can't get to the best deck in the format without starting with the mentality that you want to figure out the best deck in the format.
Yes. And once again, to reiterate, we're not saying pre-cons are CDH viable. We know they're not CDH viable. And we will always advocate for Force of Will being in your blue decks because it's just such a good choice when it comes to meta considerations for interacting on the stack in a given CDH game. But what we're really trying to drive home here is that it's okay. We are giving permission. If you're really truly seeking that, we are giving you permission to go out and do what you think is fun in CEDH. Do not let others tell you how to have fun. It is one of always the most contentious parts of the CEDH debate for the longest time, when CEDH was considered a outskirt or an outcast or not welcome at most tables and things like that. They were like, you're not having fun in the way that we are telling you should be having fun. Who are you to tell me how I should have fun? And we are now telling you that again. There is no one that is saying that you can only have fun in CDH this particular way. If you want to try stacks, if you want to try fringe brews, if you want to do those things, you are perfectly allowed to do that. Like you said, though, with the idea that you have to approach it with the appropriate mindset. You can't just dirtle with no win cons and then go 0-10 and wonder why it's not working. That's not CDH's fault. That's an error that you have to correct. But understanding that is really the key here.
Yeah. And to utilize my unfinished psychology degree and why I think there's a little bit of a response. I think there's a reason we do say that's not CDH, and it was born from what I would like to call a, at the time, coping mechanism that's now unhealthy, but at the time somewhat worked for us as a community, because it was difficult back in 2018, 2019, 2020 when someone came to the table and said, I want to play CDH with you guys. And we were doing our best with our limited vocabulary and social skills at the time to explain to them, you're not going to have fun because that deck isn't CDH. Not that I don't consider it, but you will be in a place where you take no game actions. You're not going to be able to have any relevant part, and no one's going to speak to you because you're not doing anything, and it could be bad for them. And I think we've used that term in the past, that's not CDH slogan, in order to almost bar a bad game experience, but now it's overstayed its welcome. That's not something we need. There's such a broad understanding of the format. It's literally recognized by Wizards of the Coast and within the official bracket rules that is no longer something that's helping. It's doing damage. And over on my channel, I mean, the now dozens of decks that we've created and been brewing from all the new legendaries, so many comments are, I'm so happy that someone's pushing this card. I want to see it done because it deserves that chance. Every deck deserves a shot, and it's okay if right out of the gate we see issues, but go out, live that dream. There's nothing wrong with that. You have that permission, just like you were saying.
Yep. And you do have that permission to go out and try it. CDH does not owe you it being viable. So always remember that too, because CDH is a cruel, cruel mistress. She will absolutely test every one of your strategies, and she will then prove whether or not those strategies are viable. But that is, once again, also part of the fun.
So our next and last point is the fact that my third, if I had to tier these, favorite part of CDH, and something that I think is what made me stay. This is the thing that made this not a fad like Modern was for me for my 2 years of fun playing it, or my standard days of sleeping in the back of a van and going to competitions with my random locals and having fun. The reason that CDH is my home format, which is the way I like to kind of call it, is competition and tournaments and the memories made at those, both on the battlefield, playing a game, actually sitting there, and then the moments before, after, in the practice rooms, in the practice Airbnbs, the trips you spend with one another, the constant texting and calling on Discord, talking about new cards and new ways to advantage this new commander or this 99 someone put together, these awesome tournament results we saw last weekend, podcasts. The competitions are the center of these conversations in the end of the day. There are entire channels built on it. It is the rock. Without them, they wouldn't exist. Competition is what makes me stay.
Now, here's a question for you. You feel that competition is a really good pillar of having fun in this format. What if I don't like to go to tournaments? Does competition basically tell me that if I don't like tournaments, I don't like competition, therefore it's not going to be fun for me? Or is there more nuance to that I'm unaware of?
The best part about any format having a healthy competitive sphere is the fact that there's going to be so much information, media, and exciting new tech built and thought of, and so many people so involved that you're going to have a wellspring of content to enjoy. You're going to have a wellspring of ideas to explore, decks to try out. And there are other people out there consistently grinding and advocating and pushing. Let's say, you know what, I'll even take that a step back. Maybe you play as much as these people. You just don't go to tournaments. Maybe you actively are at FNM every single Friday, playing CDH with a no prize committal, jamming with your friends and having fun. The fact of the matter is there is someone out there continually posting the results of things, knowing how good cards actually do within these spheres. And you're going to get to absorb all of that and enjoy it. That you don't have to attend any of this, but you get to enjoy the content that comes from it.
And I think that hits the nail on the head. Just because you are not part of the competition does not mean that the competition isn't a good thing for the format, and that competition does not breed good benefits out of this format and its format's growth. Competition is a very good thing. And whether that be tournaments specifically, something that comes out of tournaments, whether you said like data or other things like that, or being able to centralize and establish meta, or even something more along the lines of being able to elevate voices or elevate personas that have been able to make themselves known through something like a tournament scene. These types of things are all good and still in the sphere of competition, even though you personally yourself might not like going to a tournament, literally.
Yes. And being involved in tournaments has an advantage. And that's something I'd like to elevate for a moment, which was the F&M experience for me going into CDH. I continually went in and went, last night I looked up what the best deck in the format was. This was back in 2018. And someone was like, oh, well, have you heard of, Niv Mizzet, which I believe was when it came out. I think it was 2018, if I'm not mistaken, was Ravnica. I could be mistaken, but that had come out.
You're way off. But bless your heart for thinking it was that short of a time ago. I think I want to say it's 2012, 2013, maybe even 2011. Oh, yeah, Ravnica. Well, or are you talking Ravnica Allegiance and whatnot?
Yeah, the ones that came right before
War of the Spark.
War of the Spark.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, now we're not a date. I'm just dating myself. Yeah. We're not dating ourselves. Okay. So yes, that was like 2018, 20. I would say that's 2018, 2019. Yeah.
Yep. And I believe it was that set that Firemind released, and I at least was exposed to it finally, and people talked to me about the Ophidian Eye and the Curiosity combo, and I was like blown away. And I brought that to that F&M, started playing a ton of CDH, and then I was introduced to Selvala, and then I was introduced at the time, I believe we were starting to speculate about the blue-green pod commander that came out of that same set. I'm blanking on her name, but it was this fun, enjoyable...
Vanifar.
Yeah, Vanifar, yeah. And we started, talking about Prime Speaker and all of that. And of course, I then randomly heard on a random Magic forum some absolute nut job going obsessively over a specific Kaladesh commander. And I wonder if you maybe know the person I'm speaking of. There was this very specific blue-green 4-mana Kaladesh commander that someone on Playing with Power used to be very obsessed with.
I have no idea what you're talking about. What do you mean?
And
yes,
Rashmi,
definitely so. Yep.
Yeah, and I was exposed to Cal and Rashmi, and I was like, who's this nerd? Ooh, what's he up to? And lo and behold, I see this glorious wavy hair on my screen on some content. And I'm like, whoa, what is this deck? Okay, there's people online playing this game. What's this investment level? And I heard the first time I'd heard a tournament for Commander, and I got into it, and I recognized then, there's one local to me. I'm going to go to it. I sat down, I played some Selvala, and they went, hey, that's not how that card works. Oh, actually, this is how the stack works within this moment. And by the way, this is how priority works when you're working on someone else's turn, but someone has this flash. And I realized, oh my goodness, there's this level of clean play I'm not exposed to. And that is what tournaments provide for me. It's an environment of intense, clean play where my decisions matter and there's no, on some level takebacks available. And before that, Commander in 2018 was kind of loosey-goosey. We weren't too harsh on each other in terms of how we played. That is a kind of a post-pandemic or pandemic and going on. People started actually harping more on the rules. And within CDH, that was always the fun part, was realizing this is a place for clean play, and nowhere is better for clean play than a competition.
Yep. A lot of times people would say that Commander follows the spirit of the law, but CDH follows the letter of the law. You can have rule zero
Yes.
conversations in casual Commander games and say, I want to allow this or maybe not allow that or change this or update that. And that's part of the conversation. CDH is a rule zero conversation saying we want to play to the letter of the law and we want to see how skilled we can get at it. And now some people might be rolling their eyes right now saying, well, that doesn't sound fun. Trust me when I say it's very fun. Being able to you look at these rules, exploit these rules in a way that you can get an advantage over your opponent through knowledge of these rules in this clean play allows you to become. It gives you such a sense of accomplishment, I want to say, but essentially overall it really elevates your play because it elevates your skill level, and when you get better at something you tend to enjoy it a lot more. So even if you're not playing in tournaments, although this is one of the best ways to facilitate it, having that type of tight play and clean play, as you stated, allows that to happen, for you to level up, for lack of a better word. And it is such a satisfying and enriching feeling to get that.
And what a great way to put it. It's level up moments. And those happen mostly, to my experience, within a competition where I recognized that at some point within my journey, how the stack worked in a better level. And, when I tap Yisan and I activate the ability, you have to respond before you know what I'm getting. And I started to just absolutely use that at the highest advantage once I realized I don't have to announce I'm going to go get Dozen when I tap for the third verse. I can go, I'm going to go 3MC CMC creature and wait for the terror to ensue when it actually dropped. And there lies within this ability that only CDH pods normally allow you to do, because when you're in, bracket 3, bracket 4 games, often if you tried to say, oh, well, I'm going to do this very specific interaction, there might be the social pressure where someone goes, oh, well, actually, I wanted to top that different, or I wanted to play that different. And you can kind of feel a little rude within those kinds of pods to go, well, no, you already played it. And it just allows for an environment within a CDH competition where that is expected. And then as a result, you get to have a level up moment. You get to play and your skill gets to matter. It's not that we want to be rules lawyery. It's that we just want our thinking to matter, because if there aren't hard rules, your skill matters less and less.
Some of my biggest level up moments came from tournaments, bar none. Yeah, I had little moments here and there when I was playing online or I was playing with friends, or it just happened, the interaction just happened to show up. But if you want to seriously level up and get better at this game in a way that's more enriching, tournaments are some of the fastest ways to do that, because you will never see a place where the letter of the law is more strictly enforced in a good way in order for you to get that type of experience. You will gain more in one tournament weekend than I would say months of casual play of CDH. And for just the reasons you talked about. We're all having fun. This isn't for stakes. Let's take that back, or let's try that again. And in a tournament, you can't do that. And you learn those lessons very quickly.
Yes. And this next phrase I have kind of loaded in, I want to preface with the fact that some people have used this phrase incorrectly. They've used this as a way to be able to make an excuse for poor behavior at a table. So I want to preface that this is not at all going in that direction, but I was a huge fan of competition growing up and played a lot of sports. I was on my state teams for bowling. I know some of you might laugh the fact, but it's still a sport.
Oh, I'm laughing. Yeah, definitely so. Good for you though.
It was a blast, but also for me, it was baseball. And that absolutely has a lot of ways where I felt like I was allowed to put my all in and care about winning. I was allowed to be invested. I was allowed to be not aggressive, as we just said. We're not using this as a way to excuse frustrated behavior, but I was allowed to give it my all and not someone call it cringe. And that's what happened when I got into Magic initially at my F&M. It was, you net decker, try hard loser, you sweat. Mm-hmm. When I was 4-0ing my standard F&Ms, and I got that constantly, and I felt almost bad for being so invested in the game until I met the other sweats locally and started going to tournaments, and it felt good finally. But that was harder to find, and there has not been a more accepting community of doing your best, putting the most time in, putting the most respect into what you're doing than CDH has been.
And
And that
yeah,
has made me just feel so excited to continue go to competitions.
yeah. And I want to say that that is honestly one of the biggest dichotomies of Casual Commander and CDH. No place where you ever more maybe not more, but in a way that you were ever kind of looked down upon or something like
Yeah.
that for trying hard or trying to win or saying, I want to win right now. This is my goal. And it's so unique that Commander as a format says, well, you really shouldn't be having that goal. You should be having fun first and foremost here, mister, and wagging their
Yeah.
fingers at you. Whereas CDH is like, no, we understand that winning can be fun and we want to do that. And we don't want to be handed a win because, somebody top decked wrong or because it's my turn to win. I want to earn that win. And that can be fun. And
Oh yeah.
it's a very polar thing between casual and CEDH. And the
Yeah.
good news is that a lot of that has been bridged over the last half decade where they're not, like you said, and your local F&M where you're like looked down upon for wanting to achieve and wanting to win and trying your best to get a result through the spirit of competition. CEDH really allows you
Yep.
to scratch that itch that Casual Commander doesn't.
Absolutely. And I will never forget being there's a picture of this somewhere online. It was the top 16 at a 10K in Georgia. We had this we were 3 hours into this game, which at the time for CDH was pretty nuts. And we were in an intense stack war where I was sandbagging a Yisan activation. And this game, obviously being top 16, I was super nervous for it. I was super invested in it. A judge came over and saw me kind of shaking my leg. And he's like, I appreciate how into this you are. And it felt good. And I remember jamming that win and just jumping out of my seat. I popped off when I got it at the right time because I was waiting for a Kenrith player to do his reanimation, knowing that that could be the last thing put on this stack at the moment due to how interaction was set. At this point, we had all even looked at each other's hands. We'd already shared all the information trying to stop the Kenrith player, me not saying, oh, I have a Yisan activation, my hand doesn't matter. And just I will never forget that. That will forever be one of my favorite Magic moments. And it was only through a competition that could be achieved.
Yeah, I agree. And there was never a point where you ever looked down upon for making those
No.
decisions. And to also come around a little bit full circle, we're not saying that having fun Casual Commander that way is a bad thing. Each one is good in its own right. You're absolutely allowed to have fun in spirited competition in CDH, just like you're allowed to have fun hanging out with your friends and playing Commander casually. They're both fun.
Yeah.
They're just different kinds of fun, and both are perfectly okay.
Yeah. I think I'll kind of end us on this anecdote, and I'd love to hear your opinion on this, Ryan. Recently, I made the comparison of CDH as the V12 engine. Should it technically exist? In all practical means, oh no. But do we love it? Oh my gosh, yes, we do. It is the loudest, most fun, exciting thing. And, we rattle everyone's windows when we go by in the street. And that's why I go to competitions. I'm not trying to, drive past the Prius and break its back window just through sheer amount of horsepower flying by it. And it's still fun, I bet, to race a Prius. But I just prefer the V12.
Yeah, and a V12 is not practical.
Not
CDH is a broken format through and through. It's got a lot of problems, just like so many other things.
Yeah.
But you know what? We don't play it because it's practical.
No.
We play it because it's amazing and it's so much fun. That is why we play it. And if you are thinking about coming in, again, think about that analogy. Remember that this is probably why you came in originally, is because of how much fun it looked and how much fun it was. And trust us when we say that it is still a lot of fun. And if you are looking to possibly get into CDH but are a little bit concerned, trust me when I say the V12 is a lot of fun to play.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Absolutely. There's nothing practical about this There's nothing practical about owning something this expensive to play Magic. That doesn't make sense.
That's right.
So I'm glad we've thrown practicality out the window long ago, because that means we get to, start actually doing things that are what we would consider something that gives us adrenaline. It gives us that competition drive. It gives us that jumping out of our seat moment. It doesn't have to be this logical, sensical thing. It can be a little wild.
Mm-hmm. I didn't play and get into CDH to play fair Magic.
Nope.
I didn't play it to get balanced Magic. I have plenty of other formats to do that. I play CDH to do broken things, and I love doing them.
I will always forever say we should have Ancestral Recall.
I agree with that, actually. I really like that.
Yes.
I love that.
Well, thank you guys so much for tuning in and listening to Ryan and I tell you about what we love about this format that we are so invested in. That is a central part of both of our lives. We hope that those of you listening that also keep CEDH that closely to you can talk about your experiences and what you love about the format. And a large portion of why we wanted to do this podcast was so other people would share what they love with the rest of the community as well. We would love everyone to know why CEDH is so fun, why it's your home format. It's what you call your favorite part of Magic. And we'd love to see more posts about that.
Yep. And if you do have a specific story, please put that down into the comments below or reach out to us on our socials. You'll find them, I don't know, maybe somewhere on the screen or in the description, if nothing else. Well, that about wraps it up for this episode of the podcast. Tune in next time when we talk about our favorite format and our favorite game, Magic the Gathering. Thank you so much for watching and listening, and we will see you next time.
See ya.